Living Adventurously is brought to you in partnership with Komoot, the route planning and navigation app that helps you make the most of your outdoor adventures. Whether you're cycling, hiking, running, or bike packing, Komoot's easy-to-use technology will get you out the door and exploring more of the great outdoors. You can see where I've been exploring by checking out the highlights of my journey on Komoot. Just follow the link in the show notes. My name is Alistair Humphreys. I set out on a bicycle journey around Yorkshire to speak to interesting, ordinary people who, in very different ways, are making an effort to live adventurously. I wanted to talk about what they do, about the barriers they've faced along the way, and to seek their perspective on some of the big questions that all of us encounter in our lives. Welcome to Living Adventurously. I've written here, needs intro music. Okay, here we go. That'll do. Cycling through the Peak District should have been a beautiful part of my trip, but I was pedalling through an apocalyptic rainstorm as I headed to go and meet Sarah Lister. And frankly, I couldn't really be bothered. And the thought of trading my bike for a pub and a log fire was very tempting indeed. But I'm a polite boy, so I kept on going. And when I arrived at Sarah's house, the first thing she did was suggest we go for a swim at a waterfall up in the hills. I think it's fair to say I was not hugely enthusiastic. But I've learnt in life that you never regret a wild swim. So whilst I was thinking no, I said yes, and hiked up the hill, jumped in, and came up smiling again. And then Sarah and I, we ate pizza, and we had a fascinating chat about her time trying to escape from the London treadmill, the difficulty of changing direction when you feel yourself drifting through life, and the doorstep mile moment of commitment, of quitting an unloved job and beginning again, even though she didn't quite know what that beginning would look like. These days, Sarah works as a coach, and this has given her a new way of thinking and taught her a fresh perspective that comes from asking open, non-judgemental questions. As well as the pizza, the swim, and a beautiful village, cycling to see Sarah for this chat was certainly worth getting a little bit soggy for. Thank you for doing this interview. Thank you also for taking me into your nice little cottage out of the rain, and thank you for buying me a pizza.
You're very welcome.
This is how a cycle touring trip should be. So, first question I have for you is, how did you go from being a young woman working hard in London to living in a little cottage in the middle of nowhere and spending your days running up hills?
Well, it started really with wanting to get out a little bit more. So I was in London and just being very city-based, not really being very adventurous at all. And I noticed that I didn't have much kind of zest for life. I was sort of, sunk in my office chair every day. And I kind of saw myself. It's like it was like looking in the mirror, and suddenly you see exactly what's happening. And I didn't like who I was and the way that I was talking. I was very negative, complaining about my job, complaining about everything really, even though I actually had quite a nice job and a nice flat, but I wasn't really appreciating it or enjoying it. And it started with just a little tiny mini adventure near to where I was living. And I started to see what was around me and the interesting history, the people, that there was so much there that I, hadn't even noticed before. And that made me start to want to go out more and see more. And I started going outside of London eventually. And And it eventually brought me to Edale because I wanted to get into the hills in the Peak District. So I was coming here on my weekends. I would finish my job on a Friday, go home, pack all my bags ready for the next morning, jump on the tube at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, whenever it started, and get on a train up to Sheffield and come to the Peak District for hiking, get back on a Sunday evening, and then go back to work on Monday. And I thought, I've got it. I've got it down now. I can...
What, doing this weekend thing?
Yes.
That was the solution?
Yeah, I thought if I can stay in this job, stay in my salary, do this on the weekends, then great.
And how long did that phase last?
Quite a long time. This was all, it was all over about a 3-year period when I had the first little mini adventure in London to actually moving here. It was...
What took you so long? What was taking you so long to go from the idea to the action?
I think it was partly I was scared of admitting that I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't actually want to say that my career path was not what I wanted it to be in my 30s. So I was scared of saying that to myself, of saying, actually, I'm really lost here in London. It feels okay, it looks okay on paper, but this isn't actually what I want to do. It certainly isn't what I want to be for the rest of my life, working in that job. So, I think it was having to admit that to myself, that I'd got to that age and basically just drifted through my 20s, and I didn't feel proud of it. So actually standing up and saying, this isn't for me, seemed really scary and daunting, and I didn't know where I would go if I wasn't there.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you. So you knew that you didn't want to do this, but you didn't yet know what you wanted to do.
Exactly. And the most obvious thing was to go into hike leading, some kind of adventure tourism type job. That was the most obvious thing. And I knew that I could train to do that, which would cost a bit of money, but I could do it. However, I didn't actually want to do that. I liked taking people out on walks. I used to have a meetup group, and I enjoyed meeting new people and taking them out to places they didn't know existed. But I didn't want to make it my living, and I wanted to go out and explore on my own a lot. I really liked that.
Okay, so you had... So had you stopped? Had you finished there? Were you just breathing?
Yeah, I was just breathing.
Okay. You didn't quite know what you wanted to do. You knew what you didn't want to do. You're scared of admitting this to yourself.
Yeah.
What then? Was there something that committed you to action, or not? Was it just a sliding slope towards inevitability?
No, I had a vague plan in my head, and I had actually set a date in my calendar when I would aim to quit my job. And the reason that I was trying to plan it was because of financial reasons. I didn't want to leave my London job in debt. I wanted to pay off. I accepted my student debt, but it was all the other debt that I had, like credit cards and things like that. So I wanted to feel safe when I left. However, I attended the Night of Adventure event, and that really got me thinking about all of the things that I was saying in my head, why I shouldn't leave yet and why I shouldn't make the change. And also on the day that I actually handed in my notice, I'd gone into my office as usual, went to make a coffee at about 9 o'clock in the morning, and my boss at the time just said, Sarah, you really should be at your desk at 9 a.m. Why are you in the kitchen, type of thing. And it just got my heart racing. And this wasn't an uncommon thing. I was always kind of battling. And she was absolutely right. I should have been at my desk at 9 a.m. and not in the kitchen chatting, making coffee. But I went back to my desk and I just thought, but I don't want to be here. I don't want to have to be sitting at my desk. I don't want someone telling me that I should be doing that, even though she was right. And I literally I handed in my notice that day. I wrote it out, went home for some lunch, chatted to my mum, said, am I mad? She basically said, yes, but you've been thinking about this for years. Why don't you just do it? And yeah, that I had to work a month's notice, and that was it. And there was no grand plan. I had some ideas about what I might do over the summer to earn some money, but all of my plan in my calendar and everything had completely, I'll just put it in the bin basically.
So that was your moment of commitment.
Yes.
So fast forward a few years, you're now up here living this nice, well, seems like to me a very nice, happy, simple but fulfilling life. And you do some coaching work now.
Mm-hmm.
Amongst the, generally speaking, not specifics, but amongst the sort of people you work with, what is it that's stopping them taking the action they want to take? Are there any generalities? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Any general stuff you've noticed about the barriers? I'm really interested in the barriers that stop people.
Yeah, definitely. I think something I see the most is that when people have committed quite a lot of time to a job or a project, I think it's part that they want to continue because they've already put so much into it. So it's almost a kind of, I think some people feel a sense of failure if they stop, especially if they haven't quite made a success in their mind of what they thought they would do. Then it's that kind of like, well, I need to keep going until I'm happy with it. And the years just go by. And yes, some good things might happen. But generally, I think things aren't going the way that they imagined it to be, whether it's in a job or self-employment or whatever. So, yeah, I think it's kind of sticking at it, that kind of attitude of, well, I've come this far. It's too late now to change it, or I need to make a success of it.
That's like I know very few economic theories, but one that has been so useful for me in my life was learning about sunk costs, which is essentially that, isn't it? All of that time, money, effort, emotion has gone.
Yeah.
What should you do in the future is a different thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it was the same for me. You know, I thought, well, I've spent 5 years in this job. If I quit now, when I could possibly get to a higher role or transfer to another organisation or whatever, it was that idea of, well, I've just wasted the last 5 or 6 years. Like, what do I have to show for it? And I had nothing. I had literally nothing to show for it apart from a kind of averagely okay lifestyle. It wasn't terrible, but I didn't feel inspired by it. I think so. It's that kind of attitude of, well, I've done this for so long that it would be silly to let it go to waste. Also, I didn't want to disappoint my parents. You know, they'd really encouraged me to go to university, and I think they were quite happy that I had quite a nice job in London, you know, and I had a nice place to live. I didn't want to say to them, I really am not doing what I want to do. I don't really understand why I went to university. It was like saying all of those years and all of that energy I put into it, I don't like any of it. I wasn't proud of any of it. And it felt really hard to say that to people who have encouraged you, lended you money, been through everything with you, you know, all the yes, I got the job, and I had a terrible day at work, and all those things. So I think for me, it was that. But I think for other people who I've coached, I think it's also because they don't know what they want to do. And it was the same for me. It was like, well, if I don't do this, then what am I going to do? And that question is scary as well, because it's, you know, it presents so many other questions. And sometimes it just feels easier to keep going with what you know and what you're already doing. It feels safe, even though it's
better the devil you know.
Yeah.
Because if you change and that thing doesn't work out, then you become a serial quitter on don't you? And that's not a good place for your self-esteem to be either.
Yeah, exactly. And then you might think, oh well, I need more training, or I need, so it feels like a big pressure to change. And it is. I mean, even leaving London for me was a lot of pressure, because it was tying up things with jobs, it was tying up things with renting places, it was all the furniture, all the stuff that you collect along the way. So it's like a really big breakup, you know, everything changes, absolutely everything. So it's not something that it happens with a light heart, really. I think you really have to want it, and to be able to explore it, and to be very open to what will happen.
But yeah, good for you for making that change. Above my desk, I've got this little quote. It says, "The life that I could still live, I should live." And that's such a useful thing that you can, because you. And then another good quote is, "The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now." And I think those two things together are really helpful in my head for just kind of forgetting the past stuff and then making the decisions for now.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, the support that I had from so many different people, so from professional coaches, my friends, my parents, they've been through so many changes with me. You know, I went after college, I said, oh, I want to go travelling around the world, and I did that for a year. And then I come back and I say, I want to just travel the rest of my life, and life will just be great. And they say, oh, you should go to uni. And I went to uni, and, you know, they've been through all of this with me, and I'm constantly changing in my mind. And so the support from them has been amazing. And yeah, from all of my family, really. And I think particularly from coaches, I think, because they've kind of guided me and said it is okay to change, and it's okay to be worried and upset about it sometimes. You know, it's all just part of the journey, and none of it is in stone. Like, there's nothing along this way that is, you know, you have to stay with or stick with. You can keep changing things, you can keep asking questions and finding new answers and exploring it.
Okay, tell me about coaches. A coach is not just for millionaires or hippies or massively narcissistic wimps.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
you're saying yes, they are.
I'm saying that I think
that wasn't what I was expecting you to say.
No, I'm saying that coaches are, I think they're for people who are asking questions in their own head about anything, you know, anything in particular in life. Or it might be very vague. It might just be like a little niggle. So they've kind of got this question or a few questions that keep coming up, but they're not actually getting to any answers about it. Perhaps they're afraid to explore it. So whether it's to do with relationships or career or where they're living or anything.
But you think it's something that's a useful investment of time and money for normal people with normal problems and normal resources? You'd say that's a useful allocation of someone's time and money.
Yeah, I think it's a really useful tool. And once you have started exploring the questions that a coach asks, then you can, you know, keep that as a tool for life. So I'm not saying write down the questions and keep asking the same one over and over again, but you start to open up and you start to discover new ways of thinking with a fresh perspective, a different question. The questions might be slightly different to how you would ask them yourself. And they're very open questions. So they're without judgment, without someone telling you that that's a ridiculous idea or strange or, you know, any of those kind of negative sides to asking a question. If you've got a good coach, then they'll be very open and just guide you towards asking even more questions, really. That's the whole journey of it.
Yeah. Well, that seems a good time then to say for me. Rather than getting some coaching, I've gone for the cheaper option of going for a month-long bike ride with a microphone, and I've got a stack of question cards of questions I've been asking, and I'm going to ask you to take one off the top and give us your answer. If you don't want to answer any of them, you can ignore them.
Do you want me to read out the question?
Yes, please.
Okay. What advice would you offer to someone who has the same big barriers that are in your head and stop you getting on with things? That's interesting.
So think of the barriers that you've got, which we've talked about a bit, the things that were stopping you. There are, of course, lots of people in the same situation. What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. As a coach, I don't normally give advice.
Well, you're on the receiving
but I will.
end here.
Yeah.
Well, as a coach, then, would you just ask back some other questions to that person?
Yeah, I would actually.
Like what?
Well, I would ask first, what are the barriers? Like, can we actually identify them? So, for example, like you've been asking me what were the barriers to me actually, I had this idea about the lifestyle that I wanted to have. What took me so long, what were the barriers? And I think it's a lot to do with the stories that we tell ourselves. So I think identifying the barriers and the stories that we attach to them and asking, well, what if I didn't have that story? What if I didn't have that story about my money that I'm telling myself? I have to quit my job when I've got myself out of debt. It was like I was giving myself, a 2-year sentence in my job. And actually, the way that things have worked out, I'm earning almost the same as I was in London, and my costs are less. And I've nearly paid off my debt now. So, yeah, I think it's first not just asking what the big barriers are, but breaking them down. So you might say, oh, well, I have a fear of something. And you can start asking, well, what does that actually mean? What does it look like? How does it feel? Where does that come from? What stories are you telling yourself around that? How do you speak to other people about it? How do you tell, so I've been talking about my debt for such a long time, and I still have that story. I'm still telling people that's what I'm doing. And what if you detach yourself from that story, and then you can create something completely new?
Okay, that's a very good answer. Thank you. It wasn't an answer, it was a question. Very good. Okay. No, it's very good. Next
one off the top?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. What story would you put on the front page of the newspaper? Ooh. I actually consciously don't buy newspapers because they do tend to be very negative. And I keep my head in the sand a little bit. I would put something I've been thinking about recently is how I would like to meet people and talk to people who are kind of the hidden heroes in society. So, for example, I'd love to go to Sheffield and speak to the people who are doing things kind of behind the scenes, maybe whether they're doctors, nurses, working in a charity, or something even less obvious than that, and find out what they're doing and what impact they're having, even if it isn't on a national or a global scale, and finding out what problem they are helping to solve and finding out what it is like for them, and why they do it. That's what I think that's what I'd put on the front of a paper. That I'd actually read it then.
Cool. Heroes needed. Nice.
Next. If you could magically change one thing in your life, what would it be? that's a good question, because I've changed a hell of a lot of things.
So the reason I like this question is because it's quite nice to. It's the good thing about asking the magically part thing is you go ooh, and it removes all the reality. And then once you've come up, sorry, I'm priming you here, but once you then come up with that, I could change this. Then you can often think out, oh well, actually, I could change that without the magic part. Sorry, giving away my secret of my question.
No, I love it. Magic. If you could magically change one thing in life, what would it be? I'm just thinking of things that are going through my head are things that I can actually change, that I'm trying to change.
Go on then, give us one of those.
Well, first, okay, I'll give you one of those first, which is I really want to make more effort with the people who are close to me in life, not in physical distance, but my family and my close friends, who I tend to get wrapped up in things, the place where I'm in, and I don't very often speak to my family, not as much as I'd like to, and I don't see them as much as I'd like to. So that is one thing that I am actually working on changing. But that can actually happen. That doesn't need magic.
Well, I don't think many things do. So yeah, I think that's a good answer.
That passes as an answer.
Yes.
Okay.
Next one.
If you could live life over, what would you do differently? I would not have gone to university.
Nor would I.
100%. It used to just make me fume being there. And I knew I didn't want to go. I knew it. I knew that I didn't. I mean, maybe later on in life, I know some people feel like they've missed out. And it's not just because of student debt. I just found it to be very slow, quite trapping in terms of the financial side of things. And I just wasn't my best self. You know, I just come back from travelling around the world. My eyes were wide open, and I think I should have stuck to what I wanted to do, which was just to work and travel and do what I'd really enjoyed that year. So I would have scrapped that. Those 4 years at university, I just feel like I was just drifting and floating. I didn't fit in anywhere. I was always just biking off on my own, trying to escape it. So yeah, that's what I wouldn't have gone.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't have gone either. I think of how much time I wasted there.
Yeah.
When I could have been reading some good books or doing something useful for my education.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think a lot of people kind of say, oh, what, you know, that's my best years and stuff. But I wasn't drinking at the time. I wasn't into that kind of culture at all. So I kind of isolated myself by not being part of that. I didn't want to spend loads of money while I was there. And yeah, I just bought a bike and I went off and I think I made the best of it, but it just dragged on for so long. I took it so seriously, buried myself in books, and I'm not saying it couldn't have been a different experience, but I didn't need to go to university. Yeah.
Okay. Next question.
Next one. Can you share an example of trying to find a balance between contentment and self-improvement? Okay, I've got a good one, I think. So when I did decide that I would like to go self-employed and become a coach, which was a journey of self-improvement in itself because I was being coached and I just felt like I was improving my whole outlook on life by starting to pursue something I was really interested in, even though I was still in my job at the time. I went full pelt into trying to start my business as a coach and make it a success so that I could leave my job. And during that time, I found it really hard to have time just for myself where I wasn't working and putting myself into something, pushing myself harder. So my health went really downhill because if I wasn't at work, I was either going out on adventures and trying to improve my navigation, learning more, you know, walking, whatever, or trying to create an event I was always plugging away at something. I was eating microwave meals on the go. So that's when my health started to go downhill. And I was really frustrated because I wanted to feel more balanced and happy, but I wasn't getting enough sleep and rest, and I didn't have a social life outside of working. So I found that really hard, because I just pushed myself harder and harder and harder until I basically just burnt out. So I wasn't even showing up well as a coach either. So now, kind of like I was saying just a second ago, that I need to make more time for my family and friends, because now I do have a better balance in my health and my relationships, but that doesn't really extend to the people who really matter to me and have supported me through all of those hard times. So I really want to get better at that. That's the balance I'm trying to find now.
Cool. Thank you. I think pretty much anyone who's taking self-employment seriously goes down that manic overload thing.
Yeah.
Partly I think it's the you're passionate about what you're doing, so you just want to go for it.
Yeah.
And often I think it's the nature of the person who has the audacity and the hubris to think that they can make a go of it self-employed.
Yeah.
Combined into a bit of a crazy cocktail, I think. But yeah, certainly all that you say there resonates with me and many people I know who've gone self-employed. But equally, I think if you don't go kind of crazy at it, then it doesn't work, because self-employed sounds like you just sit around in your pants drinking tea all day.
Yeah.
But you have to do a lot of work before you get to the stage of being able to afford any tea bags.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I have been through that phase. In fact, very quickly after I quit my job, I sort of thought, oh, well, I've got my coaching qualification now. I can design websites. I can do a few little bits and pieces. People just, hire me. And in the coaching world, you are kind of sold that idea that you take the leap and, you follow certain formulas, and then you just go out into the world and people will come to you and, go, oh, I want to pay for your services to help me. And I'm not saying that never works, but it didn't work for me, and I never wanted it to work that way either. So yeah, there was definitely a gap where I kind of thought, what am I doing? I don't even know how to manage myself in terms of like my payments and taxes and all that stuff. And it seemed really scary, but none of it is as scary as I thought it was. And the way that things have worked out were never how I planned. So I think that I'm not saying to just jump into something and not have any idea how things will work out, but I think also it's really important to not stay too rigid with how you think things should go and work out, especially with going freelance or self-employment, and to be quite open to opportunities and enjoy it. That's the most important thing to me. So some days if I feel like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this and this, or I'm going to fill up my week with loads of stuff, and then I think, well, I still want to be able to go out for a run. I want to go meet some interesting people. So I try and fit that in and remind myself that's okay. And that is why I decided to go self-employed, because I don't want to work 40 hours a week or anywhere near that. I don't work anywhere near that.
But you're making ends meet and doing good.
Yeah, exactly.
And living somewhere beautiful.
Yes.
And going running.
Yeah.
Sounds like something is working pretty well. Plus, you have a lovely waterfall on your back doorstep.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for taking me to go jump in a waterfall this evening.
In the wind and the rain.
Especially because I arrived here soaking wet and quite cold and actually wasn't really up for it. But as I said to myself, you never regret going for a swim, and I'm really glad we did it. Thank you for answering my questions with a lot of eloquence and insight, and thank you for the pizza.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you, Alistair.
Thank you.
I I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Living Adventurously. There's show notes from every episode on my website, alistairhumphreys.com/podcast. If you have enjoyed it, please take a screenshot of your phone and pop it up on social media, or leave a review with your podcast provider. It makes a massive difference. Thank you very much. I teamed up with Komoot to make this podcast happen. In case you missed it, Komoot is an outdoor planning and navigation app that helps you explore more of the great outdoors. One of the many ways Komoot helps you have better adventures is with detailed route profiles. So, you've got your basic route in place with Komoot. Next step is to check the route profile. The profile displays the information you want to see, like the surface type, especially important if you're on a bike, and elevation profile, especially important for everyone, the ups and the downs. On a road bike, for example, that means you can anticipate the big climbs or ensure your adventure only includes tarmac, unless you want to spice it up and you want to suffer, in which case you can hunt for a gravel route or more single track. If you're hiking, you'll be able to see your elevation gain, as well as where on the route you'll need to push on to get through the uphills. Your very own outdoor experiences are waiting for you. Go explore more with Komoot. Head to komoot.com/G and use the voucher code ADVENTUROUS to claim your free region bundle.